This guy's really having a rough day. He saw a ghost first thing in the morning. In the early morning, while the man was squatting on the toilet brushing his teeth, a pair of black and purple feet floated in through the crack of the door. He slowly turned his head and locked eyes with a ghostly woman with disheveled hair. The man tried to convince himself it was all an illusion until the ghost floated right up to him, stared him down, and asked if he could see her. Pretending not to hear, the man continued brushing his teeth. The ghost intensified her efforts. Seeing no reaction, the ghost opened her mouth, which hadn't seen a toothbrush in years. This time, the man was so repulsed he slapped her, covering her face. The ghost started to cry. Turns out, not only could the man see her, but he could also touch her. Frightened, the ghost apologized repeatedly and fled. This man is no ordinary person. His name is Bong-pal. He has had the ability to see ghosts since childhood and works as an exorcist, spending his days banishing spirits and demons, but he doesn't do it out of passion. In fact, he despises his ability to see ghosts. His goal is to save up enough money to hire a master to seal his ghost-seeing eyes and live an ordinary life. That night, Bong-pal got another job. This time, he was hired to exorcise a ghost from a high school, with a generous offer of 10 million won. Upon receiving the text, Bong-pal immediately set off for the high school. However, he didn't know that his employer wasn't a person but a high school girl ghost named Hyun-ji. After her death, she lost her memory, vaguely recalling only that she was once a student at this school, so she returned to the school to find traces of her life. But before she could recover her memories, she was stopped by an even more powerful ghost at the school, prompting her to seek Bong-pal's help. By the time Bong-pal sneaked into the school, he sent a message to his client but received no response. He had no choice but to wander around the campus aimlessly until he spotted Hyun-ji. Sensing Bong-pal, Hyun-ji flashed to his side, startling him. In a swift move, Bong-pal grabbed Hyun-ji by the throat, flipped her over his shoulder, and slammed her to the ground. His actions were seamless and fluid, showing he was no stranger to ghostly encounters. Classic Bong-pal, the straightforward ghostbuster. Seeing Hyun-ji sprawled on the ground, he even considered giving her another kick. Hyun-ji quickly played weak.
쇼하지 마라.
나 진짜 심장이 터져. 나 진짜 심장병으로 죽었거든.
Thinking she was genuinely hurt, Bong-pal crouched down to check on her, only to be poked in the eyes by Hyun-ji.
암튼 너 오늘 죽었어 진짜. 원래 무슨냐?
너 죽는다. 내려.
It was likely Bong-pal's first time facing a ghost who fought dirty, and he found himself at a loss, resorting to pulling her hair as they wrestled on the ground. But in the end, Bong-pal suffered a humiliating defeat, beaten black and blue by Hyun-ji, and fled the school. Back home, Bong-pal couldn't stop thinking about how he had been bested by a girl ghost. Feeling quite embarrassed, he resolved to get his revenge. The next day, he returned to the high school, this time armed with weapons.
또 왔네. 또 왔어.
A showdown between man and ghost was about to begin. Hyun-ji couldn't resist taunting him, prompting Bong-pal to grab a butcher knife and charge at her. With a disdainful look, Hyun-ji dodged at the last moment, disappearing and reappearing behind Bong-pal, landing a solid kick. During the fight, Bong-pal grabbed Hyun-ji's waist, and in an unsteady moment, they tumbled down the stairs. The fall ended with an accidental kiss between Bong-pal and the ghost, which seemed to trigger Hyun-ji's memories to start returning. On a rainy night, a girl in a high school uniform lay in the middle of the road, her face covered in blood. Rain poured down on her as passersby gathered around, staring. After the accidental kiss with ghost hunter Bong-pal, Hyun-ji's mind flashed back to the scene, but she couldn't remember what happened next. Despite this, she wasn't in a hurry to recover her memory. Instead, she focused all her energy on fighting Bong-pal. Little did they know, while they were busy fighting, two reckless boys snuck into the school to livestream their adventure. At first, nothing unusual happened, but as the boys ventured deeper, they seemed to disturb something. One of them slowly looked up at the ceiling. Terrified, the boys bolted, accidentally running into Hyun-ji and Bong-pal, who were still fighting. The pair stared at the panicked boys in confusion until they turned and saw the ghost in white, prompting them to join the fleeing group. Bong-pal and the boys dashed into an elevator. Just as the doors were closing, the ghost's hand reached in, grabbing Bong-pal by the throat. In the chaos, one of the boys pressed the elevator button, and as the doors opened, the ghost's menacing face appeared. The ghost tightened her grip on Bong-pal's throat, but he managed to punch her, knocking her down. The ghost, now sitting on the ground, twisted her body and suddenly transformed into a man with unkempt hair. This scene terrified Bong-pal and the two boys. By now, it had started raining outside, but survival was their only concern. One of the boys suddenly recalled that the ghost was a teacher who had died 18 years ago. He used to spy on girls in the bathroom and was caught by a student, leading to an accident that resulted in his death. Furious after learning the truth, Bong-pal rushed back into the school, just in time to see the male ghost tormenting Hyun-ji. Without hesitation, Bong-pal threw his knife, aiming to shatter a nearby statue to boost his morale. Failing to impress, Bong-pal braced himself and charged in, only to be beaten up, proving he was no match for the ghost. The next moment, things took a turn for the worse.
저기 선생님, 제가 아무래도 좀 잘못한 것 같습니다. 하던 것만 좀 하시고 저 먼저 가보면 안 될까요?
But the male ghost wasn't about to let Bong-pal go. He grabbed Bong-pal by the throat and lifted him into the air. Seeing this, Hyun-ji immediately joined the fight. Even together, they couldn't overpower the male ghost. Luckily, in the critical moment, Hyun-ji discovered the ghost's weak spot. Seizing the opportunity, Bong-pal picked up the butcher knife and executed a powerful downward slash, shattering the ghost into oblivion. After this intense battle, Bong-pal and Hyun-ji had forged a bond of life and death. However, the 10 million won reward was definitely out of the question. They each went their separate ways, returning home empty-handed. Later, Hyun-ji was chatting with her ghost friend and mentioned how memories had flooded her mind after the accidental kiss with Bong-pal. Her ghost friend, intrigued, suggested that practice is the only way to test the truth. So, Hyun-ji sought out Bong-pal again and, with a graceful leap, flew towards him for another kiss. This is a creepy inn. Late at night, as a guest was sound asleep, the closet door suddenly opened, and a smoky black hand slowly extended from inside. Next, a ghostly woman with disheveled hair appeared before him. The man was sleeping like a log. Completely unaware of the danger approaching, the ghost moved beside him, whispering something in his ear. The man groggily opened his eyes. Word of the haunting spread quickly, and the locals gossiped about it. The inn's business plummeted, and people started avoiding it. Desperate, the owner hired the ghost hunter monk Myung-cheol to perform an exorcism. With his bald head, he looked every bit the enlightened monk. Myung-cheol arrived at the inn and began his ritual. At first, he seemed like a pro, but he turned out to be a novice. Suddenly, a scream echoed from inside the inn. Myung-cheol, having been beaten up by the ghost, fled the scene, leaving behind even his butcher knife. Meanwhile, ghost Hyun-ji, in her quest to regain her memories, boldly asked Bong-pal for a kiss. But Bong-pal, ever the stoic and straightforward guy, not only refused but also seemed somewhat repulsed. Undeterred, Hyun-ji started shadowing Bong-pal everywhere he went. She attended classes with him during the day, stood by his bed watching him sleep at night, and even disrupted him during his push-up routines. At first, Bong-pal was annoyed by her persistence, but he eventually accepted her presence. Thus, Hyun-ji moved into Bong-pal's home. One day, Bong-pal received a new job. The owner of the haunted inn sought his help to exorcise the ghost. The two students from the previous livestream incident also tagged along. Upon arriving at the haunted room, Bong-pal focused on the wooden cabinet. He opened it and inspected it carefully but found nothing unusual. Turning to check other rooms, he suddenly felt a hand grab him from inside the cabinet, pulling him in. Inside, he saw a sorrowful female ghost who, instead of harming him, urged him to leave quickly. It turned out that this ghost wasn't the one causing harm. It was her husband. In life, the female ghost had been abused by her husband, who often locked her in the cabinet. Outside the cabinet, the evil ghost was already fighting Hyun-ji, but she was no match for him. Seeing this, Bong-pal charged at the evil ghost, While outside the inn, Myung-cheol contemplated retrieving his butcher knife. Hearing the commotion inside, he decided to come back the next day. Inside, Bong-pal was quickly overpowered and found himself in the ghost's choking grip. Hyun-ji, seeing this, joined the fight and cleverly discovered the ghost's weak spot. She grabbed the ghost, urging Bong-pal to attack its waist. With this information, Bong-pal swept the evil ghost's legs, causing it to stagger. He then followed up with a powerful punch, shattering the ghost into pieces. The abused female ghost thanked them, finally able to move on and reincarnate. After this collaboration, Bong-pal's view of Hyun-ji changed, and he gave her a kiss.
모두가 돌아가는 길은 외로워.
It's said that if a person wears red before they die, they will become a vengeful ghost filled with deep resentment. This woman applied beautiful mascara, then put on exquisite lipstick. She donned a long red dress and hanged herself, recording the entire process on her phone. With bright red blood dripping onto the screen, the news quickly reported the incident. Famous idol singer Mizu was found dead at home, having committed suicide. A man was watching this news with morbid fascination when suddenly, the TV lost its signal and his phone began to vibrate. He picked it up to find a video of Mizu's hanging playing. Terrified, he threw his phone away. Just then, a hand reached out from under the bed. The police got involved in the investigation and discovered that the deceased often posted malicious comments on social media and had been sued by many people. One of those people was the deceased pop star Mizu. The ones who reported this to the police were the two livestream boys, Choi Cheon-sang and Kim In-rang. The deceased was their opponent in an online game, known by the username Sadako. They wanted to confront in person after losing to Ian game, but when they arrived, he was already dead. Cheon-sang and In-rang were taken to the police station for questioning. The investigation revealed that Sadako was not the only victim. The second-ranked person on her malicious comment list was also dead, and the third on the list was an account named Angel. Cheon-sang then revealed that Angel was his account, explaining that Sadako had hacked it and posted all the malicious comments under his name. Back home, Cheon-sang was tormented by anxiety. Netizens were buzzing about the incident, speculating that it was Mizu's curse. This woman, however, remained unfazed and continued posting attacks against Mizu online. The woman walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th basement level. However, the elevator automatically stopped at the 2nd basement level. Oblivious, she continued playing on her phone until the lights in the elevator started flickering. Only then did she realize something was wrong. At that moment, she met her end. Meanwhile, on campus, Hyun-ji was still following Bong-pal everywhere. At this point, In-rang found Bong-pal and told him about singer Mizu's suicide. Having seen Bong-pal exorcise ghosts before, In-rang wanted his help for Cheon-sang. Just then, In-rang received a call from Cheon-sang, but there seemed to be interference, making it impossible to hear anything clearly. Cheon-sang looked at his phone. The ghost, named Mizu, had been a singer in life. She had been relentlessly attacked by online trolls and couldn't bear the pressure, so she hanged herself and became a vengeful spirit. Mizu was now seeking revenge on those online trolls. In-rang, realizing the call had gone silent, grabbed Bong-pal and rushed home. Cheon-sang ran out of his room, but the ghost had been waiting for him. The ghost charged at him, and Cheon-sang quickly hid in a room, crouching by the door, trembling. Suddenly, a few drops of blood dripped onto his face. Cheon-sang looked up at the ceiling. The ghost flashed right in front of him, scaring him into unconsciousness, just as the ghost was about to break his fingers. Just then, Hyun-ji arrived, and the two female ghosts began to fight. Hyun-ji tried to persuade the ghost to stop killing, but the ghost was relentless. As Hyun-ji moved forward, the ghost suddenly appeared behind her.
왜 그렇게 날 미워하는 건데? 그냥 칭찬받고 싶었을 뿐인데.
At this moment, Ghost Hunter Bong-pal burst through the door. He rushed forward and pulled the ghost away, but she disappeared and reappeared behind him, delivering a powerful punch that sent Bong-pal flying. She then aimed a punch at Hyun-ji, revealing that the ghost had been a singer in life but had also trained in Taekwondo. Hyun-ji was being choked and was on the verge of suffocation. Fortunately, Bong-pal regained consciousness and charged at the ghost, grabbing her and throwing her to the ground with force. Typical of Bong-pal, he fought with no holds barred. The ghost, seeing her reflection in the mirror and remembering Hyun-ji's words, felt a pang of shame. She finally ended her vengeful spree. Later that night, as Hyun-ji and Bong-pal prepared to head home, Hyun-ji, inspired by the other ghost's mastery of teleportation, began practicing it herself.
어이 깜짝이야.
나 왜 자꾸 삑사리가 나는 거냐고요.
Through their many collaborations, the bond between Bong-pal and Hyun-ji grew stronger. Remembering that Hyun-ji's clothes were torn, Bong-pal bought her a dress. Hyun-ji smiled as she looked at the pink dress. Thus, their journey as a ghost-fighting duo officially began.
무너지지 않을래 그때 가서 행복해.
A woman was taking a shower in the bathroom. Out of nowhere, footprints began to appear on the floor, and a pair of eyes watched her from the shadows. Suddenly, the water stopped, and an evil hand reached for her legs. Meanwhile, Cheon-sang and In-rang were at a sauna, trying to relax after their recent ordeal. They received a text from Bong-pal, reminding them they still owed him money for the last exorcism. Cheon-sang quickly removed his phone battery, pretending he hadn't seen the message. We've all dealt with people who avoid paying back, right? In-rang, feeling too hot, stepped outside to cool off. Moments later, the light bulb in the room started flickering. Cheon-sang groggily opened his eyes. Luckily, In-rang noticed just in time and rescued him. Bong-pal was furious about not being paid and, by chance, ran into the duo. Talk about a small world. Cheon-sang and In-rang tried to escape but were ultimately caught by Bong-pal. However, they were broke, even visiting the sauna because it was cheap. And now, it was haunted. They promised Bong-pal they'd pay him back in 2 days, assuring him they had a plan to get the money. Soon, they donned slick suits and sunglasses, looking like mobsters. They returned to the sauna, claiming to be professional exorcists. Instead of scamming the owner, they actually hired Bong-pal for the job, promising him 3 million won if he succeeded. Bong-pal, enticed by the money, agreed without hesitation. They headed to the haunted sauna with Bong-pal. The lights began flickering. Hyun-ji, having drunk a bit, was resting on the second floor. A wisp of purple smoke approached her, and an evil hand reached for her thigh. Bong-pal rushed over at the sound of her scream and spotted the lecherous ghost. As he charged, the ghost disappeared and reappeared behind Hyun-ji. Cheon-sang quickly hid in the sauna, leaving Bong-pal to face the ghost alone. He was no match for the ghost, who overpowered him. Drunken ghost Hyun-ji stumbled over, performing a smooth slide right in front of the ghost. The ghost tried to kiss Hyun-ji, but she sprayed its face with fake alcohol, enraging it. The ghost threw Hyun-ji away, and Bong-pal resumed his attack. Hyun-ji noticed a weak spot on the ghost's chest. Bong-pal understood, delivering 2 punches to the ghost's chest and following up with a Shaolin technique, the 36-leg kick, obliterating the ghost. The mission was a success. On the surface, the man appeared harmless, but behind the facade, he was a cold-blooded killer. He was the deepest hidden villain of the entire series. One day, a stray cat scratched him, and his demeanor instantly changed. That very night, he found the cat and strangled it to death, a look of pleasure on his face. His student, Hyun-ji, witnessed the whole scene. The man was a professor at the school and owned a pet shop. He seemed kind and composed. Even the class beauty, Seo-yeon, liked him. Ghost hunter Bong-pal was also one of his students. One day, Seo-yeon noticed the professor's injury, and ghost Hyun-ji took a closer look. Something strange happened. Ordinary people shouldn't see ghosts, but the professor seemed to avoid her directly. During class, Hyun-ji told Bong-pal about it, but he didn't take it seriously. Hyun-ji was too scared to attend the professor's class. Seo-yeon asked him why he missed class. Just then, Hyun-ji saw the professor coming out and left in a panic, not noticing the pen he dropped. This pen was the professor's from that night. Seo-yeon picked it up and recognized it as his. Seo-yeon returned the pen to the professor, telling him that Hyun-ji had found it. Realizing he was exposed, the professor found Hyun-ji that night.
동네가 조용하네요. 사람들도 별로.
Hyun-ji sensed danger and tried to escape but was blocked by the professor. He grabbed her by the neck and strangled her like he did the cat. The next day, during roll call, he deliberately called Hyun-ji's name, though her body was already buried deep in the mountains.
노현주 학생. 노현주 학생은 오늘도 결석이네요.
After class, the professor invited Bong-pal and Seo-yeon to lunch. The ghost Hyun-ji sat down right next to Bong-pal.
뭐야?
During the meal, the professor casually mentioned Bong-pal's parents, trying to find out where his father lived now. Back home, the professor opened a photo album, revealing pictures of Bong-pal's family. Bong-pal had a tragic childhood. He saw his mother seemingly pushed by something, leading to a car accident that killed her in front of him. Since then, he frequently saw ghosts. Could his mother's death be linked to the professor? A man was exploring the mountains when he suddenly slipped and tumbled down a slope. As he landed, he noticed something beneath his feet. Soon, the police arrived to investigate. The body belonged to Hyun-ji, a student from Yonseian University. The seemingly harmless professor was the killer, who meticulously destroyed all evidence. The police determined that Hyun-ji had been strangled to death. But how could an ordinary person's hands exert such force? Detective Yang and his assistant, Detective Kim, went to the university to confront the professor. Hyun-ji had missed his class the day she died, which raised their suspicion. When the professor heard of Hyun-ji's death, he feigned surprise, playing the part convincingly. With no solid leads, Detective Yang returned to the station, but his instincts told him something was off. As he left the school, he noticed the professor's sinister smile. Detective Kim gathered all the information on the professor, discovering he was not only a university professor but also a renowned veterinarian, formerly the head of an animal hospital. Recently, he started teaching at Yonseian University and had glowing reviews from everyone who knew him a perfect man. But this perfection made Detective Yang even more suspicious. Late at night, the professor snuck into Bong-pal's house, heading to the storage room to take a book from a shelf. Ming-jer and Feng-pu's father, Park Ji-hoon, had a close relationship. When the two brushed past each other, they both paused briefly.
오랜만이네요.
Sensing something amiss, Myung-cheol decided to find Park Ji-hoon. At Park Ji-hoon's home, an elderly woman informed Myung-cheol that a young man had visited recently, prompting Park Ji-hoon to flee to the back hills. Myung-cheol found signs of a struggle and bloodstains on the rocks there. Detective Yang questioned Seo-yeon about Hyun-ji. She mentioned the pen she found, which belonged to the professor. Back at the station, Detective Yang reviewed surveillance footage from the night of the murder. Just as a man walked by, the footage became distorted and showed nothing, only to resume normalcy 5 minutes later. Detective Kim confirmed there was no malfunction, the interference was deliberate. Myung-cheol tried calling Park Ji-hoon, but got no answer. He didn't know that Park Ji-hoon's phone was in the professor's drawer, as the professor had already killed him. It seemed the professor was trying to extract some crucial information from him. But what could it be that drove him to kill so many? The dogs at the pet shop were barking incessantly because a female ghost, Kyung-ja, had entered the room. Kyung-ja loved to cling to handsome men. Recently, she had taken a liking to a professor, unaware that he was a murderous demon. Kyung-ja snuck into the professor's study and heard a phone vibrating in a drawer. She opened it and found her friend Hyun-ji's student ID. At that moment, the professor walked in, closed the drawer, and spoke calmly.
귀찮게 여기까지 들어왔네. 이러면 곤란한데.
He then turned to look at Kyung-ja, who was stunned to realize he could see her. The professor lunged and grabbed Kyung-ja by the throat. It turned out he had always been able to see ghosts and knew that Hyun-ji and Kyung-ja were friends. With a squeeze, he obliterated Kyung-ja. Could the professor be involved in Hyun-ji's death too? Detective Yang questioned the professor again about his whereabouts on the day Hyun-ji was killed. The professor hesitated before saying he had been at the pet shop all day. After leaving, Detective Yang visited the pet shop and questioned the staff. They mentioned the professor usually worked until 9 p.m., but he had left at 7 p.m. that day and didn't return until the next morning, with mud on his shoes. The next day, the professor was taken to the police station for questioning. Traffic checkpoints had captured his car on the night Hyun-ji died. On the 1st, at 11:28 p.m., his car passed through the toll booth out of the city. At 1:38 a.m. on the 2nd, he arrived in Incheon County and took Route 34 to the entrance of Friendship Mountain, where Hyun-ji's body was found. The time of death was the night of the 1st, and her body was dumped early on the 2nd. All evidence pointed to the professor as Hyun-ji's killer. The professor responded with a faint smile, claiming he had been visiting his mother that night. Just then, Detective Kim called Detective Yang outside, reporting that a potential witness related to Hyun-ji had died. The witness, a Myeongseong University student and Hyun-ji's admirer, had allegedly committed suicide by jumping from a building. He had called Hyun-ji for a minute on the 30th and confessed to killing her before his death. However, the admirer hadn't committed suicide. The professor had pushed him out of the window and used his phone to send a message to his mother, confessing to Hyun-ji's murder. The professor also left Hyun-ji's phone in the admirer's room, with the key witness dead and evidence tampered with. Detective Yang had no choice but to release the professor. Detective Yang went to see the professor's mother to verify if her son had indeed come home that night. However, she hesitated and kept looking out the window instead of answering. Detective Yang turned to see the professor standing outside, watching them. The mother seemed terrified of her son, avoiding eye contact. Meanwhile, Bong-pal and Hyun-ji were still together, enjoying each other's company. One day, Myung-cheol returned and overheard Bong-pal talking to himself in the house. Sensing a ghost's presence around Bong-pal, Myung-cheol urged Hyun-ji to leave him, warning that a relationship between a human and a ghost could never end well. Years ago, an evil spirit had possessed Bong-pal. Myung-cheol exorcised the spirit but was injured in the process, which weakened his powers significantly. Hyun-ji, contemplating Myung-cheol's words, stood by the lake and eventually decided to leave Bong-pal. On a nearby road where over 100 accidents had occurred, drivers would hear terrifying sounds on their radios shortly after entering. When they tried to turn it off, a ghostly woman in white would appear, causing them to swerve and crash. After Hyun-ji left, ghost hunter Bong-pal was deeply depressed. One day, Cheon-sang received a new case, and the team prepared to investigate the accident site. Since their last adventure, Cheon-sang and In-rang had formed a ghost hunting squad. They drove to the accident-prone area, and just like before, the radio inexplicably turned on. As Cheon-sang reached to turn it off, the ghost suddenly appeared in front of them. The team got out to investigate. Bong-pal, seeing the ghost, lunged at it but missed. His mood had been at rock bottom since Hyun-ji left, and he channeled all his anger into fighting the ghost. Cheon-sang and In-rang watched in astonishment. As the saying goes, with no woman in his heart, he draws his sword with godlike skill. Without Hyun-ji, Bong-pal's fighting prowess had significantly improved, and he quickly vanquished the ghost. After Hyun-ji left Bong-pal, she wandered as a lost ghost. One day, a car drove past her and caused a traffic accident, triggering her memories. 5 years ago, she was crossing the street when she was hit by a car. Freezing her age at 19, she vaguely remembered being taken to a hospital by her mother, with the name Hanil University Hospital on the doctor's uniform. Following these fragmented memories, Hyun-ji found the hospital. Not far away, the professor was watching her intently from his car. 5 years ago, it was the professor who hit Hyun-ji, and he seemed to be searching for something. Hyun-ji entered the hospital and found herself lying in a hospital bed. It turned out she wasn't dead but was in a coma as a result of her injuries. This realization brought hope. If she wasn't dead, she could be with Bong-pal. Just after Hyun-ji left the room, the professor entered and looked at her comatose body. He used his powers, emitting a dark aura, intending to kill her spirit. Hyun-ji rushed to Bong-pal and threw herself into his arms. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and her body began to fade. Simultaneously, her heart monitor flatlined in the hospital. As doctors worked to revive her, Hyun-ji's ghost vanished from Bong-pal's arms. The professor, believing his plan had succeeded, smiled evilly. His plan had backfired. Hyun-ji had woken up after 5 years. The doctors informed him that although Hyun-ji had awoken, she had no memory of the past 5 years. So, he refrained from acting against her for now. The next day, Bong-pal found Hyun-ji and hugged her, but she didn't recognize him and pushed him away. Her mother entered, and Bong-pal reluctantly left. Determined not to give up, Bong-pal started courting Hyun-ji, cooking her favorite foods and arranging dates in the hospital. Hyun-ji, a foodie, couldn't resist his cooking, especially since it was all her favorite ghost foods. She began to warm up to him. One night, As Hyun-ji was heading home, she felt like something was following her. Suddenly, a ghost appeared, a doctor who had killed patients during surgeries. The police had tried to arrest him for investigation, but he had committed suicide in the treatment room. Luckily, Bong-pal wasn't far and rushed back upon hearing the commotion. He fought and defeated the ghosts. This incident brought Hyun-ji and Bong-pal closer. They started texting each other at night, filled with the sweet talk typical of young lovers. The next day, Hyun-ji was ready to be discharged. The doctor advised her to undergo psychological therapy to prevent any recurrence of fainting. To her surprise, the therapist assigned to her was the professor. Meanwhile, Myung-cheol went to the police station to request an investigation into the professor. Running into Detective Yang, Detective Yang was immediately interested upon hearing about the professor. Myung-cheol had previously snooped in the professor's pet shop under the pretense of using the restroom and found Hyun-ji's student ID in his study. Detective Yang discovered that the hit-and-run car from 5 years ago was white, the same color as the professor's car, which was scrapped 2 days after the accident. Since waking up, Hyun-ji had gained the ability to see ghosts like Bong-pal and was terrified. She told Bong-pal about it. Bong-pal, not wanting her to remember her time as a ghost, reassured her he would protect her without mentioning the past. Meanwhile, the professor was silently watching them from a distance. One day, a man was hunting with his dog when it suddenly sniffed something and ran off. Following the dog, the man found a human hand. The police quickly contacted Myung-cheol. As the body was identified as Bong-pal's father, Park Ji-hoon, they suggested sending the body to Seoul for an autopsy. Suspecting murder as Park Ji-hoon's neck had been broken, the news soon reached the media, and the professor saw it. Knowing he was the killer, Myung-cheol informed Bong-pal about his father's death. Bong-pal signed the autopsy consent form and arranged a funeral. Hyun-ji came to pay her respects, feeling heartbroken seeing Bong-pal so devastated. When it was time for cremation, Hyun-ji and Myung-cheol waited outside while Bong-pal attended the final rites. Hyun-ji looked at Park Ji-hoon's portrait, feeling she had seen him somewhere before, and began to recall memories. 5 years ago, Hyun-ji visited a temple to pray for success in her college entrance exams. As she was leaving, Park Ji-hoon urgently approached her, asking her to deliver a talisman to his son and instructing her to keep it secret. He then hurried away. Curious, Hyun-ji opened the talisman to find a string of prayer beads and a note with Bong-pal's address. Myung-cheol urgently inquired about the beads, but Hyun-ji couldn't recall the details. Feeling a sharp headache, Myung-cheol stressed their importance to Hyun-ji, urging Hyun-ji to remember and inform him if she did. Distraught over his father's death, Bong-pal had no heart for romance with Hyun-ji. Hyun-ji wandered the streets and ran into the professor, who invited her to talk. She took a sip of water he offered and suddenly felt dizzy. Meanwhile, Myung-cheol told Bong-pal everything. The evil spirit he had exorcised years ago had now possessed the professor. To save Bong-pal from possession, his mother had sacrificed her spiritual energy to acquire the prayer beads, which only Hyun-ji knew the location of. The beads were a threat to the spirit, so it sought to destroy them before possessing Bong-pal again. Learning that Hyun-ji was now the target, Bong-pal called her immediately. The professor saw the call and hung up. Realizing something was wrong, Hyun-ji tried to escape but was too weak. Memories flooded back. It was the professor who had hit her with his car 5 years ago, but it was too late. The professor abducted Hyun-ji, putting her in his car, an act witnessed by Cheon-sang and In-rang. The police found the professor's DNA under Park Ji-hoon's fingernails and issued a warrant for his arrest. Cheon-sang and In-rang followed the professor to an underground parking lot, where he transferred Hyun-ji to another car. Sensing he was being watched, he approached them, but a security guard intervened. The professor, annoyed, quickly silenced the guard with a classic chokehold, killing him. Terrified, Cheon-sang and In-rang stayed hidden as the professor drove off. They tried to follow but their van broke down. In-rang called Bong-pal, informing him of Hyun-ji's abduction. By the time Bong-pal arrived, Cheon-sang had fixed the van, but they had lost the professor's trail. In-rang retrieved the navigation system's hard drive from the professor's previous car and traced his route. The professor was interrogating Hyun-ji, demanding to know the location of the prayer beads, and threatening her by using her mother as leverage. Hyun-ji, left with no choice, reluctantly revealed the location of the prayer beads to the professor. When Bong-pal and his friends arrived, the place was deserted, but they found Hyun-ji's dropped phone with a clue: Myungseong University Station. Myung-cheol joined them. At the station, the professor encountered a staff member and killed him with another chokehold. The professor obtained the beads and began strangling Hyun-ji, declaring her mission complete. At that moment, Bong-pal arrived, tackling the professor. Despite his efforts, Bong-pal was quickly overpowered. As the professor was about to finish him off, Myung-cheol attacked with a butcher knife. Sparks flying, the professor's wounds healed rapidly. Myung-cheol struck again, knocking the professor down, but it wasn't enough to kill the spirit.
정말 날 죽일 생각이야? 넌 살생을 저지르는 거고.
그걸 끝낼 수만 있다면 그렇게 해야지 놈.
With a roar, Myung-cheol charged again, only to be caught and thrown against the wall by the spirit. Severely weakened, Myung-cheol could barely fight back.
괜찮으세요?
The spirit, having subdued Bong-pal, prepared to possess him. Myung-cheol, in a desperate move, slashed his own palm and smeared his blood on the knife, turning it into a powerful talisman weapon. In a final effort, Myung-cheol slashed the spirit, the blade's aura piercing through it. The spirit was forced out of the professor's body. Myung-cheol urged Hyun-ji to find the prayer beads to destroy the spirit. Hyun-ji located the beads near a sack. With the spirit defeated, Bong-pal checked on Myung-cheol, who was gravely injured but alive. Police arrived just in time to arrest the professor. Myung-cheol chose not to reveal the supernatural aspect to the police. The professor was punished for his crimes driven by his own evil deeds. Bong-pal took Hyun-ji home, but her mother was wary, blaming him for her daughter's troubles. This meant Hyun-ji and Bong-pal had to be apart for a while. Determined to be with him, Hyun-ji focused on studying hard to get into college, fulfilling her long-held dream. In the end, Hyun-ji succeeded in her exams, and Cheon-sang and In-rang officially opened their exorcism business. The four friends embarked on their ghost hunting adventures in their trusty van.